Good afternoon, and very warm welcome to all of you to the National Science Day lecture. Very thankful to Professor Ashutosh Sharma for that introduction and reminding me that we still have some work to be done on having a science channel in India. So it's not easy to stand here in the presence of such esteemed scientists as Professor Sharma and Professor Karandikar and the ISRO chairman. So it's a very humbling experience for me. So thank you for this opportunity. And I'd like to share a few thoughts on how we can prepare for this AI-powered future, given all that's happening across the world, almost every day with new developments, new models, new claims, a lot of hype around artificial intelligence. Today we are, looking at a scenario where AI is, no longer a distant future. It is already, shaping how we work, how we live, and how we communicate. And India, with its demographics, earlier Professor Karandikar spoke about, the youth, how, we are one of the largest pool of talent, young talent in India. And that kind of creates a very unique moment, unique opportunity for us to establish technology leadership at the global level. The minister also mentioned how a large number of scientists across the world are of Indian origin. So what about AI? Where do we stand in AI, and where do we go from an AI perspective, especially to prepare our youth? So the Prime Minister recently was in Paris. He was co-chairing the AI Action Summit that was held in Paris. And he spoke about two things. That how, while there are concerns, while there are challenges, very legitimate concerns around artificial intelligence, we must not get bogged down by them. We must also look at, the positive side on what AI can do, look at the opportunities, not just worry about the threats, the risks, and the safety aspects. And these words of the Prime Minister, kind of resonated there in Paris because you had this very clear divide in the world where one part of the world, especially Europe, was extremely focused on AI safety concerns. The other part of the world, the United States, was very aggressive about pursuing AI innovations and AI opportunities. So the world is today looking at India to play that middle role on showing the way ahead. I think the next such summit will be held here in Delhi. So clearly there's a lot of work that we in India have to do on this front. So how does AI permeate our entire society today? Be it governance, be it businesses, be it education, be it society. I think there are some interesting insights that we have got by talking to students, by talking to youth recently. One of the things that comes across very clearly and very strongly is that our diversity is a strength and an opportunity that will enable us to play a very strong role in this space. But for that to happen, clearly there needs to be collaboration. The government, the academia, the industry, all need to come together to build these AI systems, these AI solutions. And I think it goes to what even the Honorable Minister was speaking a little while back on how these collaborations are actually seeing fruit in a whole range of technology areas, be it electric vehicles, be it genetically engineered cells, and so on. So let me look at a few aspects today in terms of how India's youth can prepare themselves for this AI future. I think it's not progressing. Okay, there we go. So one of the aspects of AI has been the pace of change, right? The manner in which new models have been rolled out so quickly over the last year or so. In the world of semiconductors, there is this term called the Moore's Law, where the power or the capacity of these semiconductor chips would double almost every 2 years. Now that is still a very sequential linear model. What we are seeing with AI is a very exponential way in which the technology is getting sophisticated, where AI is not just getting better, but AI is being used to make AI even better. So you have this cycle of exponential evolution that's happening across various aspects of the technology. And what this also means is that citizen adoption of AI is far ahead of both government's capacity to regulate this technology, the capacity of businesses to adopt this technology and come up with new products or new offerings, and our entire institutional capacity to understand how this technology is impacting the society, how is it impacting students, what do we need to do on this front, right? And I think that is perhaps at the heart of the challenge right now, which is this exponential pace of change that we are witnessing. So an insightful study was done recently by a think tank here in Delhi called the Center for Policy Research and Governance. They spoke to about 600 students in Delhi University to understand how they're using AI in their academic activity. And one of the interesting aspects of this study was to not just look at the potential uses, the benefits that the students were deriving, but was also to understand from them what were the challenges that they were facing in using these AI systems. And what was very evident is that across this community of 600 students that were surveyed, that the use of AI by them was largely unstructured and mostly spontaneous on their own effort. It was not part of any structured curriculum or academic program. So as part of this exercise, I had the opportunity to go to Delhi University at an event last week. And so we had this gathering of students, mostly non-tech, non-science background students, people from commerce and liberal arts. And we had this session on AI. And it was kind of very striking to me when that event was introduced, that the presenter said that AI is now a common tool. And the two words that she used were very, very instructive, that the technology is no longer rocket science. It is something very common as far as the student community is concerned. And we are talking non-science, non-tech background students here, right? We are talking liberal arts students. And to them, AI had become a everyday tool that they're using on a daily basis, and they don't see it or perceive it as rocket science. So that was very interesting. And during the session, we kind of asked the students, what do how many of you are using the tools every day? And almost everyone raised their hands. There was hardly any hands that were not raised. Then we asked them, how many of you feel that your future careers are unlikely to be impacted by AI? And hardly any hands came up. One student rose up, very interesting, that this girl said that she's majoring in psychology and she doesn't think AI will impact psychology. And then she was immediately countered by another student who said that, you know what, my friend has been using ChatGPT for counseling. So he's seeking mental health counseling from ChatGPT. So I think that is where we are, that the technology has kind of reached this point where practically no career or no profession is going to be left without being impacted by AI. And this diffusion is happening even before the curriculum has caught up with AI, the government regulations have caught up with AI. And I think that's a very, very interesting moment that we are at. So the CPRG study looked at various aspects in terms of how AI was being used. And as part of this survey, what they found was almost everyone was using AI in some manner, 95%. material. So basically understand complex topics, understand complex subjects. So I think that was a very interesting insight in that the usage of the AI tools is not just merely to gather information, but it is also to learn and learn in a language that is perhaps closer to them, perhaps their native tongue. I think that is very, very significant in terms of what this also means is that the role of teachers and teaching has to change in this AI environment because students are relying on tools for assistance, for clarification, for understanding topics outside of the classroom. And the teachers need to understand how these tools are being used, what role these tools are playing. So the question is, can AI complement traditional teaching methods? Can it replace them in some manner? Or perhaps we're looking at a hybrid future where you're not only learning from a human in the classroom, but you also have a digital twin in terms of AI that's assisting you down the road. Sometime last year, constituted a committee to look at how to reform what are called educational media centers. There are about 22 of them across various universities in India. And these media centers essentially create the educational content that you see on the MOOCs platform, Swayam, and on the DTH channel, Swayam Prabha. Right? And the intention of this committee was to look at how should these media centers be reformed with a future perspective. So I was fortunate to serve on this committee as the chairperson and had the opportunity to visit several of these universities where these media centers were housed. And it became very clear to me that these media centers will have a very crucial role to play in this AI-enabled future. So one of the recommendations that our committee had made to the chairman of UGC was that we should look at using AI tools for transforming the learning journey on these MOOCs platforms and DTH and make them more dynamic. Because today, if you look at the content, it is the same content whether I am taking a MOOCs course or somebody else is taking a MOOCs course. There is no personalization, there is no understanding of my learning ability versus somebody else's learning ability. So can we look at a more dynamic learning journey where the MOOCs platform based on AI is better able to understand your learning needs, is better able to adjust to your pace of learning, and is able to customize that entire experience. So one of the suggestions we had made was that don't just look at AI to create content, which is perhaps the easiest thing to do. I did that recently myself by using ChatGPT, that can I create a MOOCs course using ChatGPT, and I could do it in a matter of a few minutes. I could create an entire course because today AI, generative AI has that ability to create content. But what about on the learning side? Can the AI tool understand what my level of comprehension is, what my level of my ability to learn is, and then pace my learning journey through that MOOCs course in a more dynamic fashion. So that's something that perhaps can happen down the road. But I think the key question, though, in all of this is that how do we address the language issue? Because unless we are able to deliver this content in the various Indian languages, and especially specialized subjects, be it science, be it engineering. So unless we are able to do it in the various Indian languages, I don't think we would have done our job in empowering our youth for Viksit Bharat, preparing them to be competitive for global leadership. Last year, I was at an event that was organized by 3 Sanskrit universities. It was a very illuminating experience because the focus of that conference was how do we make the large pool of Sanskrit students, Sanskrit graduates, employable. And there were various ideas that were being debated. And it kind of struck me that, there's a possibility here that these students who know multiple Indian languages can play a crucial role by pairing them with these AI tools, because you have this massive project to translate textbooks in various Indian languages, starting all the way from primary school to the university curriculum. But then who will verify if the content in these textbooks is accurate. Because if you're going to use AI tools to do these translations, there's a potential for errors, there's a potential for perhaps not explaining the subjects in the right way, and so on. So you need people who have the ability to understand multiple Indian languages, and who also have the ability to understand the subject domain, and to be able to make connections between the two to ensure that this process is effective. So these are the kinds of solutions that we will have to look for in this AI-enabled future, where we are playing a bridging role between various domains, various languages, so that we can empower our youth. And I think the Honorable Prime Minister has shown the way on this, because if you look at his journey, I think the intersection of technology and Indian languages has played a very crucial role all along, and he's been talking about how we can use AI in Indian languages to accelerate our developmental journey towards Viksit Bharat. These are some more findings from this survey in terms of the kind of challenges that the students faced, especially around hallucinations. And this goes back to the point I made a few moments back on, you cannot rely on the output of AI. You have to have checks, and the only way those checks can happen is we have a human intervention. You have experts who understand the language, who understand the domain, who are able to verify if the content is accurate. So that brings me to, what is the way forward here in terms of, building AI models in India, in Indian languages. So if you look at most of the global AI models, they've all been built largely on content available on the internet with a Western perspective. And hence, there are several inherent biases. And they have a very poor understanding of Indian languages, Indian dialects, and the Indian context. So there's a significant gap there. So a key requirement for developing Indian foundational models in AI would be the availability of publicly accessible data sets, which are diverse and which reflect the Indian context in its entirety. Today, some of you may have seen in the Economic Times, there's an article that the government wants to open up the audio-visual archives of Doordarshan and All India Radio for AI development. So these archives, as you know, are a living memory of modern India. In fact, going back to decades before independence, they have captured India's heritage, India's history, culture, across not just the 20 official languages, but the several hundred dialects that All India Radio operates in. And several of these dialects, be it Gojri, Dogri, or many of the northeastern dialects, like Kok, Borok, and so on, have a very small digital footprint on the internet. So any model that is being developed in the West will not be able to do justice to these languages and dialects. So any foundational AI model that we build here in India can tap into these archives of All India Radio to be able to service requests in these various different languages. And this is possible today because the digitization of Doordarshan and All India Radio was taken up, more than a decade back. And a lot of this digital content was readily available, which today the government is, contemplating making it available to AI developers and researchers. During my tenure at Prasar Bharati, when I was the CEO, we had given IIT Kanpur access to this archive as well to develop certain models. So this process is now I think being taken much wider. And one of the interesting projects, early projects, was around the Mann Ki Baat repository. Because if you look at Mann Ki Baat, it is broadcast in more than 20 Indian languages. And it is perhaps a very authentic and reliable repository to do language modeling, because you have the Prime Minister speaks in Hindi, it's accurately translated to these 20 languages, and then the audio is recorded in all those 20 languages. So you have the ability to train the algorithm on a very reliable base of content. And some of the early work done by IIT Hyderabad, IIT Kanpur was in using this Mann Ki Baat corpus for building an Indian language model. We at AI for India have also been advocating that unless we make publicly accessible data sets from an Indian data context, we won't be able to really help this development of Indian foundational models. So we've been advocating something called Data Dan, where the idea is that can we motivate government organizations, public bodies, universities, private businesses to make their data sets available to AI developers in India so that Indian startups can catch up and build these models with the Indian context in mind. And several efforts are already underway on this front. For example, you have Anuvadini, which was created at AICTE, which is today being used for the textbook translation effort that I had mentioned. And then beyond translation, you're looking at a whole bunch of areas like speech recognition, multimodal interactions, and so on. And the Prime Minister has very rightly pointed out that unless we experiment with technology, we will not be able to accelerate this developmental journey. And he's been a role model in that sense. If you look at his own personal journey, he's not been shy of experimenting with new technologies. He was one of the first to use social media to directly communicate. He was one of the first to use live streaming of his speeches. I remember in 2012 when he did his first Google Hangout, that day the servers of YouTube in India crashed for almost an hour before they could bring it up. So in that sense, he's been a pioneer in the use of digital technologies. And he was also one of the first to use AI to translate his speeches, which we saw during the 2024 elections. So his vision that he had laid out at this Paris summit, I think kind of lays the roadmap in which we should move ahead. So in his mind, clearly the AI models have to reflect the diversity of India. They have to capture this wide span of India's dialects and India's languages. They have to capture India's native knowledge systems, India's wisdom, and reflect our cultural diversity and heritage. But most importantly, I think this is a very strong point that he made in his Paris speech, was to make AI sustainable. Because what we are seeing with ChatGPT and all the models that have been developed in the West, the large language models, that they are extremely power hungry. They need large data centers. They need captive power plants to be able to fuel all of that computing that is required to operate these large language models. Our path to AI has to be different. We have to have a more frugal, more sustainable way of doing AI, where we don't require such massive compute power and the energy requirements that go with it. Secondly, our approach to AI has to be reliable and trustworthy. And I think in this context, it is worth pointing out that a large number of the lawsuits that have been filed against OpenAI are around the copyright violation, because when they went about building their model, they did not do it in an exactly ethical way. They just pulled information off the internet without necessarily seeking permission from those who has published that information. And then you have DeepSeek coming out of China, where the rumor is that they trained DeepSeek on the output of OpenAI. So here you have a second order effect of unethical behavior in model development. I think the path that we have to take in India has to be very, very ethical. It has to be very different, and hence our approach to Indian AI has to be very reliable and trustworthy. Here I think there's a strong potential for using AI to accelerate research and development. And this is a subject that I'm sure most of you will appreciate, that science and technology development research can benefit with the right kind of AI tools. We're already seeing it in a whole bunch of domains happening worldwide. So what does it mean for AI to be a metaphor for aspirational India? That I think we must not be content with just technologies that have been developed elsewhere. I think we have the opportunity to create technologies here in India which can be adopted and disseminated worldwide. We've already seen that with the space program, how successful our space program has been, how frugal it has been. We've shown it with our digital public goods like Aadhaar, UPI, which are able to deliver societal scale benefits with a very unique Indian way of going about it. And there's a whole new generation of startups which today are thinking about developing deep tech products from India for the rest of the world. And I think that's a significant change that has happened in India. Professor Karandikar, I don't know if he's still here, but I was very fortunate during my tenure as Prasar Bharati CEO to work with him on nurturing a domain from a deep tech standpoint, where we looked at broadcasting, for example. Can we develop a chip that can receive broadcast signals on mobile phones? Because then that gives you the ability to reach the masses in India directly without having a dependency on 4G or 5G or internet to be able to deliver, for example, educational content or MOOCs content. And if you look at a technology like this, which is called direct-to-mobile broadcasting or D2M, combine it with AI, like the scenarios that I spoke about earlier on MOOCs, you're looking at a very uniquely Indian deep tech stack that can go all the way from semiconductor chips to AI-enabled educational applications, which can be delivered to our youth right across the country without the dependency on expensive technology. So all this potential exists today, and I think the moment calls for engagement between academia, between research labs, and the startups, like the ones that we saw earlier today, and to be able to bring these deep tech products to the market and compete with the best of the best, the leaders in various domains, be it companies out of the United States or be it what's happening in China. But for this kind of collaboration, I think you need to have an open approach to innovation, because often we get bogged down by intellectual property concerns, we get bogged down by copyright concerns, and that kind of restricts the amount of innovation that can happen. So one way to break these walls would be where industry collaborates more openly with startups, with research labs, with our IITs, with our universities, with our educational institutions. Recently, for example, Dream11 has experimented with something called a Gameathon, where they are collaborating with 53 technical institutions and 13 IITs, where they're making their data sets available to teams from these various colleges so that they can do a hackathon of sorts on the data sets made available by Dream11 and then be able to generate insights, generate applications. So these are the potential opportunities for collaboration, for open innovation, which can deliver on this dream of what aspirational India wants. If I look at what are we doing beyond LLMs and beyond generative AI, so there's a startup in Bangalore founded by IITians, which is looking at a vision model for AI, where they're able to analyze CCTV feeds for a whole range of applications, from manufacturing to retail. Similarly, another startup is combining computer vision with sensor data for the livestock industry. So they're taking deep tech right into animal husbandry, where they're monitoring the calves, their reproductive health, and are able to give real-time insights by combining computer vision and sensor data. I already talked about the archives of DD and AR. There's a team in IIT Kanpur which has worked on an audio model based on these archives, where they're able to sense and detect a whole range of audio sounds which go beyond spoken words to include musical tunes, ambient noises, for a whole range of applications. So all of this is potential that is happening in India beyond this hype around large language models and generative AI. Similarly, in the context of research, and I think a subject that would be very relevant to this audience, there's a Pune-based startup which has developed an architecture for a large knowledge system. And what is interesting is that this doesn't require huge compute power. It doesn't require massive GPUs. It can be optimized and run on a laptop. It can extract knowledge from across a large repository of source documents, and it can be used to generate very reliable and trustworthy insights. Because in the case of research, you cannot afford hallucinations, you cannot afford fake citations, and we've seen that with ChatGPT, that it can make up academic papers that don't exist. It can make citations that have never happened. So what you need is very, very highly reliable tool for research, and these guys have developed it. And this demonstrates that Indian innovation can perhaps match or even better a DeepSeek or a deep research. So how should India's youth prepare for AI? So it's very clear that LLMs and generative AI will not necessarily be the most reliable way to obtain deep domain knowledge. And one example that always comes to my mind is from Star Wars, where you have these two characters, C-3PO, which can speak in 6 million languages, which is very, very creative, very expressive. But then the real engineering knowledge, the real engineering abilities were in R2-D2, which could solve real problems. So this contrast, I think, is very, very important when we look at this whole AI hype cycle that currently we are in, that ultimately it is human insight that comes from specialized understanding that will always give us an edge over the machines. But then it won't necessarily be enough to specialize in just one domain. I think you will have to have this ability to connect the dots across diverse domains. Professor Sharma just talked about synthesis. I think that is exactly what this is, that you need to be able to synthesize these these ideas by making connections across seemingly unconnected domains. And that can only happen where you are able to develop an understanding of multiple domains. And a good example is who are called polymaths. Historically, polymaths have been this word has been associated with geniuses, where they have understanding in very diverse domains, people like Leonardo da Vinci and so on. But I think all of us at some point in time in this AI era will have to become polymaths, where we are able to apply principles from across very different domains to solve problems. And that is how we retain an edge in this AI era. So how do you marshal AI to automate your routine tasks? Will become a very essential skill across domains. And in several specialized areas, ultimately that human supervision, that human oversight will be a mandatory requirement, perhaps even legal and regulatory requirement. For example, a lot of companies are trying to use AI for preparing legal briefs, to use AI as a legal tool. And we've seen that often these LLMs make things up which are not real, which are not factual, and that can cost you severely in the case of a lawsuit. So you have to have a human oversight on how do you verify and validate that what contract the AI has generated or what legal brief the AI has generated is valid, it is accurate, it is reliable. And the same will be true of even something as commonplace as software coding. Because today, again, one area where you are seeing a significant impact of AI is in software code generation. But then who will verify if the software code that has been generated is accurate? Who's going to test it? Who's going to make sure that the code is doing what it is supposed to do? And more importantly, it is not carrying some malicious code to do things that it's not supposed to do. So the only way to verify it is through, again, human intervention. So having these skills across these various domains becomes extremely essential. And perhaps what you'll also see, I think several speakers today spoke about the importance of data. So it is not merely enough to make data available for AI development. You need to enrich it, you need to annotate it, make it reach a level where AI can understand what is in that data. If, for example, we have an image or a video, you need humans to annotate every element within that image, every frame within that video, make it more informational so that the algorithm can make meaningful sense of what is in that photo or what is in that video. So you are looking at a whole new class of jobs that will arise around this whole function of data enrichment, data annotation. So that is another area where our youth should be looking at preparing themselves for careers. Which brings me kind of to my last slide, that I think we are at a juncture where human progress is at a pace we have never seen before. And I think it is a significant moment. And how do we ensure that we as a country we as a society are able to compete with the best of the best while ensuring that nobody is left behind and the entire society is lifted. And one way to do that would be to ensure that these innovations that we are creating here, that we saw today, for example, the electric tractor and so on, they have a way to diffuse through the society to the lowest strata of society, where even the smallest of entrepreneurs, the individual workers, are using these innovations in their everyday life. And an interesting measure of this is what is called diffusion. It is basically a measure of the ability of a society or an institution to absorb innovations and to make them commonplace in terms of usage within their environment. Because it's not enough to just say that we've adopted various innovations, but the use of those innovations has to trickle down the entire length and breadth of that organization or that society. An interesting study on this was done by Dr. Jeffrey Ding in a paper where what he calls the diffusion deficit in science and technological power. This paper's focus was largely looking at the technology race between US and China, but I think its lessons are relevant to India as well. And one of the relevant messages in that paper is that diffusion will not happen unless you have an ecosystem, a culture of developing an ecosystem for adopting innovation. So it's not just about one organization, one institution. You have to create an entire value chain where these innovations trickle down. And he also talks about open innovation, something that I spoke about earlier. And I'm sure Professor Ashutosh Sharma will appreciate this, because in this paper he picks up an example of chemical engineering on how in the early 1900s, both Germany was ahead of the US in industrial chemistry, but it was the US which really established a leadership position in bringing out chemical products, because in the US they institutionalized chemical engineering as a discipline, where, for example, creating an entire body of knowledge with rigor around unit operations and so on. So he goes on to use this example to say that if you have to bring in a new technology, it's not enough to just create new innovations. You have to have, this less flashy, boring stuff of engineering it to make sure that it trickles down, it is reliable, it is sustainable, it gives you long-term advantage. And unless that discipline is put in place, you will not reap the benefits of new technology. And that is how you get long-term strategic advantage as a science and technology power. And I think while there is a lot of hype on DeepSeek and what China has done, according to this paper, there is still a substantial deficit in terms of diffusion in China. And I think that is what gives us a hope and a window of opportunity that if in India, we can ensure that we are able to diffuse these science and technology innovations, we can get ahead of even the so-called tech superpowers today in the world, which is US and China. And I think this kind of sets the stage for the direction that we need to take in India for AI. The Prime Minister has been an inspiration and a role model in that he has shown how he personally has absorbed and diffused technology, not only within his own office, his own operations, but the entire movement that he's been leading. And he's able to do that because he's a great listener, a constant learner, and a master communicator. I think these are the three skills that will be, will hold you in greater stead as you prepare yourself for this AI future, where learning never ends. Learning is a constant pursuit, and that's how you will ultimately thrive, not just survive, but thrive in this AI era. And hopefully you will realize this vision, this dream of a Viksit Bharat by 2047. Thank you for this opportunity. I think it was wonderful to speak to all of you.